That's right. Don't you want me to do that? Good afternoon. Call the meeting, the Academic Affairs Committee to order. Trustee Cunningham will join virtually. I'd like to welcome the new trustees, Jerry Griffith, Charlie, and Jerry Heidelberg. Trustees today will discuss the May Academic Affairs item. Dr. Temple will begin by presenting the annual nursing report.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Temple, and I'm IHL Nursing Education Director. As the regulatory authority for accreditation of schools of nursing in the state of Mississippi, the Office of Student and Academic Affairs Nursing Education oversees the development, the implementation, and evaluation of new and existing schools of nursing in Mississippi. And as per the Mississippi Code, this is all schools of nursing in the state. So this is our private institutions, as well as our schools of nursing that are located in the community colleges. Deans and directors of schools of nursing submit an annual report for review to IHL Nursing Education. In addition, schools of nursing are required to be nationally accredited, and a state site visit takes place concurrently with the national accrediting team. For the next agenda item, you've been provided with handouts in the folder that include data from the Mississippi Board of Nursing, and a summary of the IHL Annual Nursing Report. And then I've also put a few slides together. Table 1 is some data from the Mississippi Board of Nursing and its Mississippi active licensure statistics. So that's handout 1, table 1. And you can see that there are 53,000 active registered nursing licenses in the state of Mississippi. This number has increased since 2020. And we have to, though, keep in mind that even though these are active licenses, it doesn't actually mean that those individuals are practicing nursing in the state of Mississippi. They may be retired, they may have left the workforce, or they may be working in another state or travel nursing. But we're an NLC state, which means they can have a Mississippi license and cross state lines and work in another state. The number of APRN license, and that's our advanced practice registered nursing license, continues to grow. We had 758 added this last year. The majority of those are certified nurse practitioners. Table 2 is Mississippi nursing licensure statistics by degree. The number of registered nurses with baccalaureate degrees and associate degrees, they're close in number. However, baccalaureate degree prepared nurses do outnumber associate degree prepared nurses again this year. That's also a national trend. In the past, associate degree nurses outnumbered our BSN prepared nurses, but we're beginning to see that trend change over, and BSN prepared nurses outnumber our associate degree. The second handout includes a brief summary of the full May 2024 annual report for Mississippi nursing degree programs based on that data that was submitted by schools of nursing in fall of 23. And the annual report will also be available on the IHL Nursing Education website. The first table provides information regarding our 25 state-approved schools of nursing by type of institution, and then 41 degree programs that are offered. Admissions is in table 2, and this provides current admissions, enrollment, and graduate numbers. During the academic year 2023-2024, we had 3,865 admissions, and this is across all programs, as compared to 3,924 for the previous academic year. So that's a difference of about 59 students from last year. Overall, admissions have decreased 2.3% over the past 5 years, with a decrease seen in the associate and baccalaureate levels, but increases seen in our graduate programs. If you look at the PowerPoint slide, this further breaks this down into our pre-licensure numbers. Many times what we're asked is how many nurses are graduating, and when someone asks that question, they're talking about new nurses who are graduating and entering the workforce after taking their licensure exam. And if you look at the disaggregated data a little bit, you can see that while our BSN program numbers are lower, that number is an RN to BSN student admissions and enrollment. Actually, our pre-licensure BSN program option has increased 8.5%. Enrollment in fall of 23, there were 5,810 students enrolled, which is a slight increase when compared to the previous year's enrollment of about 58 students. Overall, there's been a 3% decrease in enrollment across all programs. And just like with admissions, that decrease has been at the associate and baccalaureate degree level, while graduate programs have experienced an increase. And then again, the PowerPoint slide further shows enrollment numbers for pre-licensure programs, with associate degree programs having a greater decrease in enrollment when compared to pre-licensure BSN programs. Our graduate numbers during the academic year 2022-2023, there were 2,638 graduates compared to 2,557 for the previous year, and that's 81 more students than last year. The 5-year trend still indicates an overall decline, representing the overall decrease in admissions and enrollment that we saw in the wake of the pandemic. But you can see again on the PowerPoint slide, from last year in the associate degree and baccalaureate degree programs, there were about 104 more graduates from associate degree programs and 100 from our pre-licensure BSN programs. Next, this is our nurse faculty vacancy rates that our schools of nursing report. This is in handout number 3, table 1. The rate continues to increase, with our community colleges reporting the highest number of vacancies. They reported 25 this year, and we have an overall of 33. We have 117 full-time nurse faculty and deans and directors that reported they plan to retire in the next 3 to 5 years, and that represents about 24% of full-time nurse and faculty and deans. Table 2 is our NCLEX RN licensure exam pass rates for Mississippi. And this does not include students who took a second time or multiple times to pass. This is first time pass rate in order for us to compare to national, because that's how national reports it. And you can see that our Mississippi programs continue to outperform the national trend. And what is exceptional is a 92% in 2023. And what's even more exceptional than that is that for the first quarter of 2024, we have a 98% first-time pass rate on the NCLEX RN. And this is at a time when the NCLEX RN test plan changed, and faculty have had to prepare students for that new test plan while experiencing an all-time high faculty shortage. So they've done an exceptional job preparing these students to enter the workforce. Would anybody like to ask any questions on this report? This is all of our schools of nursing. Community college, private, and public. Yes, sir. Okay. The second item is during the 2023-2024 academic year, 2 schools of nursing and 2 degree program types had a state and national accreditation site visit. And so I'll present the findings based on annual reports as well as accreditation site visits. An initial full and continuing accreditation for all programs is recommended except for 4 schools of nursing, representing 6 programs for continuing accreditation with conditions, with the reason and condition listed on the handout that you have. Conditions requirements include the development of a performance improvement plan by June 30th, or a follow-up report to the national accrediting body. And additional monitoring requirements have been placed on these programs that have not met one or more state-specific requirement. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Presswood will present the remaining academic affairs items.
We have requests to add new academic units for Mississippi State University. MSU is requesting the School of Health Professions to be established on the MSU Meridian campus. This school will house the Department of Physician Assistant Studies and the Department of Healthcare. Academic degree programs to be housed in this school are the Master of Science in Physician Assistant Studies, the Bachelor of Science in Healthcare Administration, and the Bachelor of Applied Science in Healthcare Administration. The 5-year cost of implementation for this is approximately $2.9 million. The second request is the School of Nursing to be established on the MSU Meridian campus. This school will house the Accelerated Master of Science in Nursing Initial Licensure Program. The School of Nursing will also serve as a home for developing new educational initiatives to elevate the education of the current nursing workforce through graduate study and new emerging professional certificates. The 5-year cost of implementation is approximately $11.4 million. Mr. Parker, would you like for me to continue, or do you want to discuss these?
We discussed these some at our last meeting. I realize that some of you are new. Without being too repetitive, I had expressed a concern at that time to reference a School of Nursing at Mississippi State University when they have one program, which I have supported and our board has unanimously supported, that is a master level programs for those who have an undergraduate degree that want to become nurses. The issue that I had was that the reference of a School of Nursing with one program of that type appears to me to be misleading, as well as doesn't appropriately reflect what is presently at Mississippi State University. There are no other schools in the country that have one program like the program at Mississippi State, which is on the Meridian campus. So it is very unique. And every other program in our state at a public university is called either a School of Nursing or a College of Nursing. But those programs are very different from this program. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to some of our colleagues at Mississippi State. I see Dr. Shaw is here today, and also Dr. Keenum, about my concerns. They were very great to talk to me and share with me what they thought in terms of why they believe they should be separate programs. What I had asked them to do was to have a School of Health Professions, which is what they're essentially doing for a part of their PA part of their program, and put the nursing under it. I know some people had expressed a concern that if you did not call this a School of Nursing, even though it's not required for accreditation, that it may be adversely viewed by accreditors. From doing some independent research, I found there are at least 4 schools, 3 in New York and 1 in Texas, that are called either Schools of Health Professions or similar topics that don't have nursing within the name. So I had brought that up. That was not something that they were inclined to do. So that's essentially where we are today. I still have the same feeling. I'd like these 2 schools combined and to be called the School of Health Professions, and let them do what they need under that. And without trying to state exactly how all the comments that I received, which I appreciate from Dr. Starr as well as Dr. Keenum. One, I think I've relayed to you that other schools call these schools and colleges. Another was they wanted the dean to be completely focused on the accreditation, which I can appreciate. And they believe that they needed separate programs because of separate duties. So we just have a difference of view on that. When the program came to us, those of you who were here at that time, there was never a discussion of what the school would be called. Had it been called a School of Nursing at that time, we would have had a much more in-depth discussion. That would have just raised something different to me. From conversations with them, well, I'll just let them speak for themselves if they have anything else to share, but I think I've pretty well summarized what the differences are in points of view. At the end of the day, it is just a name. We're not changing the program. We're not changing what happens. They've gone forward with their stages, and I understand they're doing well, and I wish them well, and want all of our programs at all of our universities to succeed, and particularly our nursing programs in our various schools. So those are my comments.
Excuse me, I'd like to address your statement that there's no other program that only has a school that only has one program in it. But the School of Professional Nursing Practices at USM only is another.
Yeah, what I said, there's no one anywhere in the country that has one program that's only where you come in for this single master's level course, which is a condensed course, as opposed to a 4-year program. When I hear School of Nursing, to me, and perhaps it's because I lack the educational degrees that many of our educators have, I think of someone that comes in and takes a 4-year degree at a school and finishes with a degree in nursing. I think that's what most of the public of Mississippi would think.
Can
So-
we clarify that for everybody, like what this actually is? I know when you say initial licensure, you're saying they don't already have a bachelor's in nursing. That's what that means,
Correct.
correct?
That's
So
right.
these are people who got a degree in something else, but they still meet the criteria to get a master's in nursing under this program. Now, also, if I'm not mistaken, don't we still have to another vote on this program? to
You do not
pass?
have to vote on the program. It's already been approved. What is the stage 3 vote, Melissa?
I guess my thought was, do we have to have the name of the school decide this before we do our third vote for accreditation?
Well, yeah, and I don't want to delay anything they need to do administratively at Mississippi State in terms of naming and proceeding. And I think the difference would be what you call the person in charge of both programs. For accreditation purposes, a nurse in charge of the nursing program has to report to the provost. That's what we talked about last week, our last meeting, excuse me. I'm going to support the phase 3 when we get there. I hope we all will, and I hope they have a great accreditation process. If people want to wait on that, I really am not trying to cause a problem with whatever needs to be done at Mississippi State. It's just, had this come to us with a school of nursing at Mississippi State, there would have been a much more robust discussion at that time. Came to us as a limited program, and perhaps I was not farsighted enough to think about what does that mean and what might it be called in the future.
Casey, can we also, just for our new board members, talk a little bit about, one of the reasons, or I guess there were two reasons that stand out in my mind as to what was so appealing about this is, number one, there is no other program of this nature in our state. Right?
Correct.
This was something nobody else was doing. The other was, it's being fully funded by the
That's
Riley Foundation,
Yes.
correct? Okay, so if we could talk about that a little bit, and then if, for my own benefit, how this really differs from the bachelor's program that Ole Miss and Southern already had.
Okay, this differs from those programs because if you have an undergraduate student, let's say that I'm going to use a scenario of a student who would like to go into physical therapy. In order to practice physical therapy, you have to have a master's degree. So this person graduates with a bachelor's degree, they try to get into physical therapy and they're not successful, but they want to be in healthcare. What's another option for them? Well, they could go back and earn a second bachelor's degree in nursing, or they could go this route and earn an initial license at the master's level in an accelerated master's of science in nursing. And how long is the program? 12 months. It's a 12-month program. So it is very different than the undergraduate program. And Mississippi State hired a consultant to evaluate what is currently going on in the nursing landscape in the state of Mississippi. And they identified that this is a program that we do not offer. And so that's the request that came forward from Mississippi State.
I guess my question is not what's the difference in a bachelor's in nursing, but the accelerated programs that Southern and Ole Miss have that only give a bachelor's. How much longer do you have to go to get that program to?
It's really more about the coursework and the number of hours. Because the difference is a second baccalaureate degree or a graduate degree. So even though it's a short time period, there are 21 semester hours packed in there. This is a unique program that is going to be special for certain individuals. It's, they will be competing for students with like UAB. And I think Emory has a program similar to that. So they're not competing with other programs in our state. And we currently had, I think, 4 We have students now in Mississippi who are applying through our Common Academic Marketplace to attend these programs in other states.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree with with the statement that they're not competing with other schools within our state, but they have a very different offering. If somebody wants to go for 12 months, there's no other school in our state that does that.
So
I
how
do
long
agree
is
with
the
that.
Ole Miss program and the Southern Miss program that offers this same type program that's gives you a bachelor's instead of a master's?
They're also limited too to about 12 months, but again, it's the number of hours that are taken within those semesters is going to be different. I'm not exactly sure. I
We
can
do
get
have
that
the
for
chief
you.
academic officers here, if either of you know the answer to that. Sorry, we weren't prepared with this information. Is there anything you'd like to add? Okay.
I'm just asking for information purposes. I mean, I think, this is all helpful. I was in Africa when we looked at this last time.
Since I'm from Meridian, would y'all mind if I shared some things? We have 4 hospitals in East Mississippi. We have a large Mississippi, the mental health hospital for Mississippi there, have a private pay mental health hospital. And then we have Ochsner's and we have Baptist newly arrived. We have a very big shortage of nursing. There was a nursing program by USM, and USM at some point 8 or 9 years ago determined to abandon that program. And we have not had that amount of nursing in Meridian. We have a lot of our economy of our region resides there. It's not like these people that are going to these classes are typically people that are already working, they're in this area. They're typically not 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old people. They're older people that are getting their education. And the Riley Foundation realized that we had a really big problem on healthcare in Meridian. Nobody was actually tending to it. And hey, we're gonna fix this. And arguing about to me, little things that don't seem to really make a big deal is what we're gonna call this or call that. We're here presenting a need, and all through the pandemic, all we heard was medical shortages, nurses, doctors, physicians. And obviously Mississippi is way behind in that. And if you called the 2 major hospitals in Meridian and ask them how they feel about it, they would tell you that we really are behind and we need to really get going. And so we've had this really wonderful foundation help. And it's a thing is we want them to continue to help more and to help our people be well and not get into turf battles. And hopefully this won't get into that.
I think we're talking about 2 different things. You talked about the need. We've agreed on the need. We've agreed on the first 2 phases. The third phase is not going to be any issue. I believe it'll be fully accredited. The only question is the name. So what we have is a number of our colleges who have schools or colleges, and those have had nursing programs, and none of those have other professional programs. So the name's
What does
important.
this hurt? What is the harm of being a school of nursing?
To me, the impression is that Mississippi State has a nursing school instead of a one program that is, as we've heard, a 1-year abbreviated program in nursing that is unique. So that's just how it strikes me, is that it should not be a school of nursing. I think the question can be asked the same way. How does it hurt calling it a school of health professions? It's not going to change anything taught in the classroom. It's not going to change anything that you're paying anybody as a professor. It's going to all be the same. So I've just relayed to you how it strikes me and how I would view it. Nothing against the Meridian program. I don't want y'all to hear me saying that because I've voted for it and will continue to do so. And at the end of the day, if we're only arguing about a name,
Yeah.
it's not the big type argument we will have, but it is important. And that's why I bring that up.
Can I make a statement?
Sure.
For the new board members, the only thing that I picked up on this, when you were saying, when you use the word they, I hope they are successful. We're a group of a board. We represent all 8 universities equal. So there's really not a they, it should be we. You
I'll
know,
be
so-
happy to call us all we, but
Well,
I'll refer to every school
I
as
know,
they.
but we do, we represent all schools in the state equally, you know, so
Yeah.
they, kind of.
Well, let me first apologize if anyone at Mississippi State takes it as a personal affront, because that's exactly why I've met twice with Dr. Keenum and Dr. Shaw on different issues. And it's exactly why I proposed something that our group voted down that was a we versus they program earlier, but that's a different issue. We can discuss that another day.
Out of the 11.4 million cost, how much of that is state money?
Dr. Shaw, can I call on you to come answer that?
Right now, our intention would be that would be a combination of Riley funds and tuition. And so at this point in time, our projection is that it would be no state money involved.
So the Riley Foundation's writing several $1 million worth of check.
Yes, over $6 million.
The Riley Foundation's going to write that check, and they want to call the School of Nursing, it needs to be called the School of Nursing.
Could I comment? I grant that we're not privy to any of the prior conversation about this, but it seems that it's more whether we have one dean or two is the issue than maybe the name. And I've never been in healthcare, but I've stood up a lot of businesses. And anytime I've stood up a new initiative or a new business, having a point person to make sure that that entity or that business is successful has been critical. And I think having a focused individual to make sure that this program is launched without a misstep is respectful to the Riley Foundation and to the school.
And I appreciate that. And that's why I look to see that other schools did things differently. But I do understand Dr. Shaw's position on that. And he made that clear, and I hope I had already relayed that to the board.
What is the current size and what do you project in the future?
So we have hired a dean and 5 additional faculty. And our goal is to have 30 students seated in the first class. And obviously making sure that we get final accreditation stage 3 passed is the goal. Obviously, we would love to see that number grow over time, but our focus is on that first 30 while we get final accreditation.
Any other comments?
Continue. Okay. We also have a request to add a new academic degree program. Mississippi State University is requesting the creation of the Bachelor of Science in Artificial Intelligence to be housed in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. This 120-hour degree program is designed to equip students with the knowledge, skills, and expertise required to become proficient in design and development of artificial intelligence systems. This program provides a strong foundation in computer science, statistics and probability theory, data analytics, cognitive science, machine learning, robotics, ethics in AI, and specialized electives. The market demand for AI skills has been robust and continues to grow. AI has been incorporated into various industries, including technology, finance, healthcare, retail, and e-commerce, entertainment, automotive, agriculture, and manufacturing. Salaries in the various areas range from $96,000 to $150,000. If there are no questions about this program, I'll move on. Okay. The last item on the agenda is that tomorrow I'll be requesting for approval of first reading of several proposed amendments to Section 600 policies, which is the Student Affairs and Admissions section. At your seat, you have 2 handouts. Handout 1 is a marked up copy of the proposed amendments. All changes are presented in red, Strike-throughs indicate that existing language is being deleted. Underlines indicate that new language is being added. Handout 2 is a clean copy of the proposed amendments. At the top of handout 2, you will also see a list of rationales for the proposed amendments. The rationales for these proposed amendments are to clarify admissions policies to ensure consistent implementation across the IHL system, to simplify the manual time-consuming process of calculating the college preparatory curriculum grade point average, which does not provide a complete picture of the student's academic work. And then third, to clarify residency and align residency policies with court cases that dictate decisions and processes regarding residency. Also on handout 2, after the rationales, you will see a timeline of the review and revision process. The need to review the board policies in Section 600 was first discussed in the Chief Academic Officers meeting in August 2023. In October 2023, we convened a meeting at the Mississippi State Cavs Extension Center in Canton. All university chief academic officers, vice presidents of enrollment management, directors of admission, university council, special assistants in the AG's office, and IHL staff were invited to participate. With approximately 50 people attending, we began reviewing each policy in Section 600. As you can see on the timeline presented, we continued this work over the course of the past 8 months. So today I'm going to present to you the recommendations of this working group, which have been approved by the IHL Chief Academic Officers and myself. We propose that 7 of the 18 policies in Section 600 be amended due to the rationales that I mentioned earlier. The proposed amendments, if approved by you, will be effective for spring 2025 applications received after July 1st, 2024, and all future term applications. As I go through the changes, you can use handout 1 to follow along with the slides that I'm using to provide you with the highlighted, with highlights of the proposed amendments. Section 601, we're removing the reference to the manual, which has historically been a copy of the policies as well as a procedure manual for the summer developmental program. Institutions should reference the policies and bylaws on the IHL website to ensure that they are using the most current policies. And the summer developmental program is no longer managed by IHL and no longer required to be a set program across all institutions. Section 602A, we removed the beginning with students entering in fall 2022 from the title since that is no longer necessary. The second change is to change language in mathematics required CPC to make the requirement clearer for counselors. And the third change is to add a sentence at the end to account for students seeking admission from other states to our state that they must earn credits for the courses listed on the CPC or equivalent preparation as determined by the admitting IHL institution. 602B, full admission. We're proposing to add for first-time undergraduates to the title, deleting the sentence that says the college preparatory curriculum grade point average is used, adding a definition for first-time undergraduate. Then we are proposing the following changes to full admission requirements. Instead of calculating a college preparatory curriculum GPA, we would ask admissions to check courses to ensure that the CPC or equivalent courses have been completed. And then admissions would use the cumulative GPA as reported by the high school or use an IHL approved unweighted cumulative GPA calculator. The changes are proposed to criteria number 1, 2, and 3 to use the cumulative GPA instead of the CPC GPA. And then the fourth criteria, we're proposing removing that as a fourth criteria and making it a standalone criteria below the 3 criteria 1 through 3, since it's NCAA's criteria for admission. We want to remove the statement about students scoring below a 16 on the ACT since that's covered by another policy. And then add a statement that says, in addition to their use for admissions, institutions may require ACT or SAT scores, AccuPlacer, or other assessments for placement purposes prior to registration. And that's because criteria 1 for full admission and the NCAA Division I standards requirements do not require an ACT or SAT score for admission. But institutions need those assessments to be able to determine how to place a student properly in their academic coursework. Add a statement that students must submit a final official transcript with graduation date prior to the second term of enrollment. And add a statement that admitting institutions may establish additional admission requirements. For 602C, the changes here are just for clarification purposes to say that this holistic admission process may be used for Mississippi residents and graduates of any Mississippi high school who applied and failed to meet full admission standards in Section B. 602C1, clarify the language to say that students may be fully admitted as a result of this review. 602C2, clarify the language to say that students may be fully admitted. Each institution defines readiness through their placement cutoff scores, adding language here to say as determined by the admitting institution in compliance with 608 intermediate courses, and then changing summer developmental program to a developmental program that will be developed by the institution. Section 602D, we want to delete this section. Section 602E would become D, and the title would change to Admission as a U.S. Citizen Transfer Student. Add the IPEDS definition for transfer student. Add criteria for full admission for transfer students with 30 or more transferable hours. Add criteria for full admission for students with less than 30 transferable hours. Add a statement that institutions may establish additional admission requirements for transfer students. Then 602E, clarify the language to say that non-residents of Mississippi will be admitted using the same qualifications as Mississippi residents or equivalent preparation as determined by the admitting institution. 602F, add a section called Other Factors. This would be a new policy to allow an institution to consider other relevant criteria such as an applicant's criminal conviction history or student conduct history at a high school or at another institution of higher learning. This does not automatically preclude a student from being admitted. It allows the institution to conduct a review to make their admission decision. 603, applicants 21 years of age or over, clarify language for consistency and add a statement to allow admitting institutions to establish additional admission requirements. Section 604, change the long title to Other Applicants. Group applicant categories. So there'd be 2 categories: that applicants without a diploma from a regionally accredited high school and homeschool students, and applicants with high school equivalency and international students. We add clarifying language in here and add a statement that applicants in this section may validate the college preparatory curriculum in an alternate way, and that admitting institutions may establish additional admission requirements, and then add a statement that applicants may be required to appear for an on-campus interview. 608, intermediate courses, add language to say that institutions may require ACT or SAT scores, AccuPlacer, and/or other assessments for placement prior to registration. This is added on statements A through C. 610A or 610 residency requirements. This is applicable to all of the residency policies. We've reordered several subsections of 610, clarify residency language, align residency policies with court cases that dictate decisions and processes regarding residency. Let's see. Clarify residency language once again and remove reference to community and junior colleges. Section F, clarify residency language. And then for children of faculty or staff, change faculty or staff to employees and remove reference to Board of Trustees for any community college in the state. Then 612, we remove references to boards of community and junior colleges, remove extra language to state only that the Board of Trustees of state institutions of higher learning is authorized to prescribe the amount of tuition and fees to be paid by students. So that is a very quick introduction to the changes. You may not have questions yet, but I'll entertain the questions and then I'll present this again to you at next month's Academic Affairs Committee meeting. But if you have questions in between now and then, you're welcome to send those to me and I'll get answers to you. Do you have any questions at first glance?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to make a statement, Trustee Parker. First, I want to thank Dr. Presswood and her staff, as well as the student affairs, academic affairs, and legal staff on our campuses for the many weeks of work they put into this, because Section 600 needed a lot of cleanup work. And I think this is, you all did an excellent job of addressing all the issues. I just want to thank the internal staff here at IHL as well as the staff on our campuses for cleaning up this section of our policy handbook.
Thank you, Dr. Rankins.
Go ahead, Jean.
I do have a question, and I assume that this is correct, but don't assume things. So you worked with all the IOs or academic affairs folks at every university?
I worked with all of the chief academic officers, the vice presidents of enrollment management, the directors of admission. After every revision, I sent it to the chief academic officers. They sent it out to all the people on their campus. I received all of the information, feedback from all of the campuses, made edits, and would send it back out. I think we did this maybe 10 or 12 times. You can look over there and see how exhausted the chief academic officers are, but it was a great process. And the university council were very involved, which I think was helpful to our IHL attorney. Once he received this, he knew it had been reviewed multiple times by university council.
And you had no major objections to anything that in the end?
No, not in the end, no. And we did, so I mentioned the initial meeting that we had in October with all of these groups. And then I think I've had 2 Zoom meetings with the admissions directors because, they're digging in and they're reading this and applying scenarios to it. So they had a lot of questions and we made a lot of changes based on their feedback. And that went back to the chief academic officers for discussion and approval.
I don't know what AccuPacer is.
AccuPlacer is an assessment similar. It's used at all of our institutions. When we had the summer developmental program, they would use AccuPlacer to, and based on whatever cut score in whatever subject area, that would determine if you made the cut score, you could get placed in a college level course, or if you were below the cut score, you would get placed in an intermediate or a developmental course. And AccuPlacer, isn't that from College Board? That's a College Board examination.
The other question I had, and this does not appear to be a change, but in the homeschool area, it says all applicants may be required to appear for an on-campus interview. Didn't know why that's unique to homeschool, and if we want to just let every school have the option. I realize that every section says schools may have their own additional requirements, but that just struck me as different.
That was a request from one of the chief academic officers. Would anyone like to address that? Wasn't any of them.
Okay.
It's certainly something that I can reach back out and say, is this necessary to add to the homeschool section? Dr. Wilkin?
That it was a homeschool environment. There isn't an external third party to validate records or to validate identity. So as a result of that, an interview may be requested one question of that, and it gives them the permission to do that.
Okay.
So it's not necessary. It just says it
Right.
may be required.
That's how I read it. I just know we have a lot of very vocal homeschool parents in our state. You know, my kids are not in a homeschool situation. My grandkids that live here in this state, the ones in North Carolina actually are. So I know they're very aware when they see things that look different, but that certainly is a good explanation, and that'll let us explain that to people and in case we're asked.
Ms. Morrison, could I get you to speak just for a second about homeschool requirements in the state of Mississippi? Tell it and introduce yourself.
My name's Heather Morrison. I serve as the Director of P20 Partnerships as a liaison between MDE and IHL. Mississippi has very limited homeschool regulations. The answer to your question too, if you noticed, it was also about non-accredited high schools on there as well. So a lot of our homeschool programs may not necessarily be accredited programs, but through the other review process at our universities, that enable them for a student to come in and see. So it was just another check verification to see, because a parent could essentially make their own transcript for a student. And so we wanted to ensure that we had all options available, that they would bring in the student if they had to have an interview. Also, we're seeing a high rise in online high schools that have become a problem since COVID and are also non-accredited. And so we're seeing some issues with that. So I do think the extra review process, and that can be applied to any student that may not necessarily meet one of our missions.
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily target, I would say, homeschool or non-accredited high schools, but an option to allow the university's autonomy for a mission.
Those students that take a national test, then they're going to have a level of examination in those broad subjects that are covered.
That's correct. I'm saying it, please correct me. A lot of times our universities utilize the ACT as one of those
Right.
measures, just like a student that would graduate from a Mississippi high school, public or private. So they look at a variety of factors, whether it's ACT, extracurricular involvement, things that they were involved in through their homeschooling process.
Yeah, other states do have a more rigorous
They do.
program and verifying scores all throughout and extracurricular too.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Excuse me, any other business to handle? Motion to adjourn. Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Trustee Cunningham,
Aye.
thank you. Thank you for participating today.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Are you okay? I'm actually working to change. About 14.5.
Right now.
That's all right. Okay. Maybe I'll put it in bold, black, the parts that you need to be. Yes. I can get it like darker red. Okay, but the red is okay? I can do that.
Easy today.
One of my favorites, just for this reason.
I appreciate it. Yeah. They're calling back. Yeah, of course. Yeah. If I can do anything wrong with it. Well, it's really, I didn't have a comment in athletes and overexertion, bodybuilders. It can also happen certain girls. Exhaustion. It is on. Yeah. Yeah. You can recover, you will recover. Muscle, as soon as those muscles aren't. Now you'll be weak. Yeah. But you generally. It is on you, it is on you. Everything's okay? Everything's good? We got one more. Right. Good to see you. Good to see you too. Things going all right. Things going good. How are you? Good to see you. I'm good. I've heard a lot about you. Yeah. Down here. Well, yeah, that'd be all right to do. Need all the help I can get. Yeah. She oversees, she's operations doctor. Everything now is glass, right? At least you probably got metal.
Hey, Bridget, do we have a quorum? We ready to go?
Yes, sir, we do. You can
Oh.
start anytime.
All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I call this meeting of the Health Affairs Committee to order. We have 3 new trustees joining us today, Mr. Jimmy Heidelberg, Mr. Jerry Griffith, and Mr. Charlie Stevenson. I personally welcome you guys, gentlemen, and I look forward to meeting you tomorrow when I'm able to be there in person. As a reminder to everyone, please use a microphone when speaking. Dr. Woodward, for the benefit of our new trustees, if you would, let's begin by introducing your team members. Then after that, we'll have a monthly financial summary and then a quarterly clinical quality update after that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cunningham.
Good afternoon, Mr. Martin.
All right, so I'm taking that as the green light to get started. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So since we have most of our new trustees here today, I thought we'd take a few minutes and just kind of run down the table and around the room and do some quick introductions. The team that's here with us today is the team that for the most part will be attending the Health Affairs Committee meetings. So there'll be people that you'll see regularly and get to know. So I thought we would just do some quick hellos. I'm Lou Ann Woodward. I'm the Vice Chancellor at the Medical Center. I've been in this job. I'm in my 10th year, finished 9 years in March and started my 10th year. To my great disbelief, somehow time flies, but it's been a wonderful ride. We've made a lot of progress, had a lot of great accomplishments due to a lot of things. The team that's here with me, it's a wonderful team that I have to work with. And then the team on this side, the board has been very supportive and has really helped guide us and supported a lot of critical activities that sometimes are a little high stakes. So we've appreciated that very much. But we'll start, if that's all right with you, William, and just we'll run down the table and then go around the room.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Diddy, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer. I've been at UMMC for 13 years and been in this role for about 18 months.
My name's Alan Jones. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Clinical Affairs, so I help oversee the health system, and I'm starting my 5th year in this role.
And I'm Jennifer Sinclair, Chief Financial Officer, so you'll get the pleasure of the monthly financial report from me every month. And I've completed my first full year now, so happy to be here.
I'm Jonathan Wilson. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer. Been in this role for 10 years now. Been at the Medical Center since I was a student in the 90s.
I'm Mark Rolfe. I'm Executive Director of Communication and Marketing, and I've been at the Medical Center coming up on 13 years. I'm William Knight. I'm our Chief of Staff and Director of External Relations at our Oxford campus at Ole Miss, and 8th year at Ole Miss and approaching my 5th year in this role.
Brian Rutledge, I'm the Chief of Staff. I've been at the Medical Center for 22 years, and I've been in this job for 12 years. Mostly I take care of the Vice Chancellor and manage the Vice Chancellor's office, but I also have reporting to me human resources, IT, government affairs, communications and marketing, development.
So when you need something from me, we'll give you all our contacts. When you need something from me, feel free to reach out anytime. If you want it really fast, reach out to Brian.
Hi, I'm Rachel Bressett. I'm the Executive Director of the Contracts Office at UMC. I've been in this role about 2 years with UMC on this phone. Hello, I'm Stacey Baldwin. I'm the Chief Officer. Stephanie Jones, Deputy General Counsel. I do whatever William needs. I've been at the Medical Center for 12 years and in my current role, 6 or 7.
I'm Lee Bidwell. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, oversee the research mission at UMC. I've been at UMC for 22 years and coming up on 1 year in this role.
I'm Scott Rogers. I've been at UMC for this my 10th year and my third, entering now my 3rd year as Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer at UMC.
Thank you for that time to introduce the team. Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you for the financial.
Okay. Okay, I think you all have hard copies, but we'll also do the slides. So I may do a little orientation for those of you who've not seen this format before. But this is our income statement for the performance of the medical center, all consolidated. So it does include the schools, the medical center, our physician practices, and all that we do. So you'll see on the left side for orientation is the performance for the month of April. And then on the right side is year-to-date performance. The numbers are small. I'm gonna have to have my glasses to see too. So the top section is our revenue streams. You'll see the first line of patient care revenues. We're at 139.9 million for the month. Patient care revenue makes up about 81% of the total revenue at the medical center. So it is the bulk of our revenue, but you'll see the first line is actual, then we compare it to budget and then also show you compared to prior year. So you'll see strong volumes for the month of April at $10.9 million over budget and $11.6 million over prior year. The next line is just our monthly state appropriations. Those are appropriations that are intended to fund our academic and research missions. So their actual and budget would be the same. Then we get into grant revenue. We had $13 million for the month. It was over budget. That's related really from a timing perspective and what we're able to recognize as revenue for the month. So good performance for the month. It was almost $5 million over budget. Then you see our tuition and fees at $4 million, so a little bit over budget, and then philanthropy and other revenue. So totaling our revenues for the month at 177 million, which is $16 million over budget. So really strong performance, and you'll see when I get to the year to date that we've had really strong performance in the revenue all year. The next section are our expense categories, and like many businesses, what drives the bulk of our expense are salaries and benefits and supplies. You will see that fluctuate with volumes. So when the hospital's busier, when you see that patient care revenue number being higher, you can expect that expenses will be higher. They are in proportion. I'll say many of you heard me earlier in the year talk about challenges with salaries, and particularly contract labor to staff the hospital. We have seen significant improvement in that over the course of the year. We looked at some numbers today. Our contract labor numbers are way down. We've got, I want to say the numbers around 75 right now of contract labor that's truly staffing agencies. And so the team's done a really good job of bringing down the rates and the need to rely on that. And that even is with the higher volumes. And so When I look at salaries here being over budget, when you look at salaries, wages, benefits, and contract labor together, it's in proportion to the additional revenue that we saw, both for the month and year to date. But I say all that to say, then look at the total operating expenses of 164 million. We are 13.9 over budget and 14 million over prior year. But that leaves our operating EBITDA, and you'll hear me say that a lot, but operating EBITDA is 12.8 million, which is above budget. EBITDA is our earnings before interest and depreciation. And so that's the target we like to give to our teams in each of the different missions, because those are the things typically within their control. And so we give them benchmarks there or targets to hit from an EBITDA. And then the next lines are depreciation, interest expense, which is the interest on our bonds, and then investment income. But our overall net income for the month of 8.1 million, the budget was 5.2. So we were 2.9, almost $3 million over budget for the month. Then if you look over and just kind of scan year to date up at the top again, revenues, you'll see at 1.6, almost 1.7 billion. It is $66 million over budget and 141 million over last year. Patient care revenues driving a lot of that. So we have been really busy in the hospital. I'll share some of those results with you later in today when we talk some strategy around budget, but volumes have been really good. So surgeries are up, clinic visits are up, and so volumes are strong. Then if you look in the expense categories, really the same thing we talked about with salaries and supplies are running higher with that volume, but our operating EBITDA year to date is running $1.3 million ahead, so right at $81 million. And then total net income at 45.6, that's also significantly ahead of budget and 43 million ahead of same time in the prior year. So strong financial performance, I would say, through April and for the month and year to date. The next is a waterfall graph that's sometimes helpful just to see in a graph the reconciliation from our budgeted EBITDA. So again, that's earnings before interest and depreciation. And so on the left, you'll see the budget, and then the waterfall graph shows you the positive and negative differences to get us to the actual performance for the month. And so you'll see there what I kind of went through earlier in the numbers, but patient care revenue at $10.9 million above budget, and then grant revenue 4.7, so a strong month there. And then in the red side would be just those increases in expenses, again, associated with that volume. And then this is a look, that same reconciliation done on our year-to-date performance. So again, the big green is patient care revenue. Dish and cost report, we'll get into the nuances of that. It's related to additional reimbursement that we've received on the hospital side. And so those have been positive variances for us year to date. And that's where those numbers come from. And then again, labor is running above budget, which is expected with that increase in volume. And then you'll see all the way over to the almost $81 million in EBITDA. The next page is our balance sheet. You know, really, if you study this, and I'm happy to do that with you anytime, but if you study it, cash, and I'll show you more details on cash in just a second, but cash and accounts receivable are important to us. Obviously, we have targets around cash management that you guys have set as standards. And then accounts receivable is I'd say our biggest asset outside of cash, and then the investment in property. And then on the liability side, the big number is related to pension. And so month to month, what we like to manage are these two metrics. And so I always like to point out the days cash on hand calculation. This graph shows you on the blue line the current year performance for 24. Orange is 23 performance, and then there's a target of 90 days that has been our established target that IHL set for us. And so you'll see that we have had some volatility. That relates to some supplemental payments that we get in the hospital setting that comes not every month. It's not consistent every month, but it's spread. And you can see we dipped in December and the number went way back up in January, and it's because of the timing of those payments. We are budgeted to end this year at 87 days. You'll see later that I project will end much higher than that. But as of April, we are at that 92-day mark, which is above that target of 90. Some of that's driven from, well, a lot of it's driven from our performance this year. But we'll also, if you look on the right side, when we look at days in accounts receivable, this is how long it's taking us to be paid for the patient care that we're doing. And you'll see that 24 performance at 43 days is significantly less than what it was running last year. And so we've done a lot of work this year around revenue cycle, and we're seeing increases in cash collections. We've had really 3 strong cash collection months the last 3 months, and that's helping drive that decrease in AR and that increase in cash. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have around our April or year-to-date, either one.
Got a quick question on the investment income on the consolidated income statement. What's driving that on the year-to-date?
Well,
You're well over budget and a good one.
we've had a really good year, really good returns. You know, we've got, yeah, we were pretty conservative in the budget, I would say too, and you'll see us want to do that again next year, but returns have been higher than that. I mean, so rates have been good on those accounts. The budget wasn't quite, we were closing on the bonds for Colony Park last year, and the budget just wasn't quite done exact according to that.
You talked about the cost, the labor, supplies, purchase services. To what extent is that attributable to the additional services you provided or an increase in cost from some other reason?
How much is driven from each?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and try to calculate it, but obviously both. I mean, so when we spent some time this morning looking at supplies as a percent of revenue. It's running about 29-30% of net patient revenue. That's been fairly consistent over the last couple of years. And so it hasn't fluctuated significantly on the supply side. Even with increases that we see in like drugs are obviously always increasing. We've done a lot of work on the utilization side and the pricing side. You probably remember an engagement with Pathstone. And so we've done a lot of work to try to get better prices. And so that's helped some with those increases. So supplies have been fairly consistent. Contract purchase services, there's some engagements in there like the Huron engagement that we're doing. There's several $1 million in there associated with those consulting efforts that won't carry forward, but it's in the current year performance. And then the question around salaries. Early in the fiscal year, we were using more contract labor and paying more for that time than we are today. So early on in the fiscal year, and you probably remember that, we were always over budget. Some of that would have related to the cost of that staff. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That's helpful.
We developed a plan, really even more than a year ago, looking at the labor cost and how much we were using contract labor, you know, true contract labor, like you think about travel nurses and those sorts of individuals, and have been successful in working to our plan of both decreasing the rate paid for those, you know, kind of additional staff members, but also decreasing our utilization of those folks. And we've been successful in moving our targets and working, you know, toward less costly labor in those particular buckets. We have been able, just for everybody to know, which a lot of hospitals have not, we have been able over this last several years to keep all of our beds open. So we have in some cases paid higher prices because we've had to bring in some contract labor and whatnot to keep all the beds open. But the demand for our beds is so high. We cannot take all the transfers that are requested every day. We are still, you know, not able to do that. We're full. The demand for our beds is so high. as long as we can, have it in a manageable and controllable way, we feel strongly that we need to keep all the beds open.
And I'll say that if we look at traveler rates, and I know you can't see this document, but we started the year at $122 an hour on average for the staff. And a lot of it's RNs. It's not all RNs. It's some ancillary staff, but we were at 122 and that number's down in the mid 80s now. So we made significant reduction in the number we have, but also in what we're paying.
And that's to some degree, following the market. We are pushing it a little bit, I think, in some cases, but across the country, the rates for, and again, we're kind of picking on one category, but it is probably the most well-known category. The rates for the travel nurses has, it's not what it was 2 or 3 years ago. So we've been working hard to get that in a more reasonable area.
Do you see that going further down? Or do you think it's going to stabilize at these numbers?
I think as things sort of normalize and they are getting, working in that direction now, that we'll continue to have a higher than what we would have considered normal 5 years ago level of employee labor cost. I think there are some things that are going to remain more costly than they were. We're not going to go back down to pre-pandemic rates, I don't think. And also some of the supply cost, will remain higher. I think that's just the nature of the business right now.
I was going to mention that our big problem right now is not necessarily in nursing as much as it is in ancillary services. So laboratory technicians, echo techs, radiology techs, those types of services. We're seeing rates for travelers for those services as high as nurses were at the peak. Nurses are down significantly, down around $80 an hour. Some of those echo techs, MRI techs, CT techs are at $120 an hour. So I think as we see shortages in these different ancillary areas, we'll continue to see spikes. We just heard today that physical therapist was one that's spiking up real high right now because none of the physical therapists want to do hospital-based work. They want to do outpatient-based work. As Dr. Woodward said, it'll take a while to normalize the workforce after COVID, but our labor expense per adjusted patient day is higher than before the pandemic, but lower than it has been in the last 2 years now. So we're pleased with how we've been able to do that.
Okay, any more questions from the trustees? Thank you, Jennifer. I think we'll move on to Dr. Didion and the quarterly clinical quality update now.
Before she kicks off, I want to just say a couple of statements in introduction. So this report about our patient quality comes to you every quarter, and we have an opportunity to share these things with you and have conversations with the board. So Jennifer mentioned that 80% of our overall revenue comes from patient care revenue. About 10% comes from our state appropriations. We've got some nice charts that we can share with you, especially the new trustees when we have some visits with you this summer. But the remainder comes from a variety of sources. Tuition and fees, grants is an ever increasingly important source of revenue, and then philanthropic funds. But that 80% is kind of the gorilla in the room. It's the patient care revenue. For the last decade, we have put our quality efforts, our patient quality efforts, patient care, patient outcome, patient safety as our top priority, because we know that if we provide an excellent patient experience and a high quality experience, all of the other things will follow. Reputation scores, patients, the dollars, that all of these things are tied to patient quality. So it has been, and it continues to be, very important to us for a lot of reasons, and I know she'll touch on them, but very important to us for many reasons to have this conversation with y'all on a quarterly basis about the efforts that are going on around our quality work. It really is the most important work that we're doing, because again, if we get this right, all the other good things follow. If we don't get this right, then we're in a hole we can't dig out of. So let me just turn it over.
Yep.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Diddy.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better, I don't think. And I would absolutely agree. Clinical quality is the most important thing we do at the medical center. Obviously, it's what our patients expect. It's what our payers expect, and it's what our faculty and staff expect. I think it drives a lot of kind of the pride that folks have working at the medical center to get it done right. It is a critical initiative that we've been very thankful that the board's been supportive of. And I think it's important for us to kind of report out to you regularly to keep you updated on our progress, our successes, and where our opportunities are. It holds us accountable to what we say is our number one priority. So appreciate the time. Today, I'm going to give you an update on Leapfrog. So one of the things that you'll hear from me frequently are our priorities for clinical quality at the organization, and they are priorities based on what's good for our patients, what's good for our reputation, and what's good for our payment. And Leapfrog is one of the two main reputation scores that are public out to the community for anyone to see on the internet. The spring scores were released May 1st. We remain a B. I'll show you, for those that are kind of new, what our journey has been over the last several years, but last fall was our first B, and so we were happy that we stayed there. Since this is new for everybody, I thought I'd give a little bit of background on what Leapfrog is. They're actually called Leapfrog Group. They were founded back in 2000. They describe themselves as a nonprofit watchdog organization, and they really focus on patient safety, quality, and transparency from the eyes of a patient, a consumer. And the Leapfrog safety grade started back in 2012. And the idea behind that was trying to simplify hospital quality for patients. And of course, putting it in a letter grade, I think is a way that it resonates with a lot of folks. We're all very familiar with letter grades. This is a busy slide, and I really want you to kind of pay attention more to the right side. But this is a list of the 23 metrics that go into the Leapfrog grade. And what I want you to notice is, other than the very top one, which is a self-reported survey that every hospital can voluntarily do, they don't have to do it, the rest of the metrics come from CMS. CMS has, I think of it as like a big pool of data that all hospitals must report to them if they want to qualify for reimbursement programs. This pool of data has good aspects and bad aspects. The good aspects is it's a very standardized pool of data. It allows us to benchmark ourselves against other organizations. Some of the kind of lesser ideal things with this data is that it's always old. I mean, you can see the timeframes on a lot of those, still back to 2020. And when you think about all the statistical analysis CMS has to do for these, you can understand why the data is a little bit older. The other thing is there's not a perfect risk adjustment in any data model, and certainly not in CMS's, but risk adjustment is really important for hospitals like ours, academic medical centers that are safety net hospitals, because we take care of very vulnerable sick patients, particularly when you're the only one in the state. And sometimes that risk adjustment may not, give a full picture of the type of patients we see. So it's well documented that risk adjustment is a little bit harder on academic organizations. But, I'll give Leapfrog credit. I think these metrics of patient experience, complications, hospital-acquired infections, mortality are bread and butter, fundamental clinical quality metrics that we all should be paying attention to. This is what, if you look at the national scores for this spring, the percentage of hospitals that were graded an A through an F. So you can see we were a B, 26% of hospitals were graded a B. What Leapfrog does is they assign you a numeric score, and this was our numeric score this past May, 3.0431. And so we kind of like to do this internally to know how close to a B or an A that we are year over year. I mentioned earlier this journey that we have, and October 15 will go down in infamy at UMMC because we were an F. And what my predecessor would say was that was one of the best things that ever happened for him.
I'm not 100% sure I
Yeah.
would agree with that.
Yeah. But in terms of making clinical quality a burning platform, getting everybody's eye on the ball, that this is something we need to work on. And, you know, it really helped him, I think, get everybody on board and engaged, particularly leadership, the board, to say, we're going to support this and we're going to make it right. And you can see we've done great. And, you know, we're still a B. We did slip a little bit from the fall grade, but that B is a pretty small area. So little changes make a significant change there. We like this slide. This we show every 6 months in terms of our grade and how we compare the top several organizations. There are other what we would call peer organizations, you know, academic medical centers, safety net hospitals, and then the last two, Baptist and St. Dominic's, obviously the other hospitals in the metro area. And you can see, you know, we are in the mix. We are, you know, leading the mix. I think some things when you look at the past recent grades, obviously University of Arkansas and Little Rock moved to an A. They've been kind of trending along with us. So that's great work on them. And everybody's getting a little bit better. You can see there's a lot more Bs this time around than there were in the fall. So how have we done the work? Well, number one, it's making priorities. And I mentioned those priorities earlier: patients, reputation, and payment. And sticking to those and not veering from that. Setting goals, developing multidisciplinary teams. And in particular, I think a lot of our success here is a lot of these teams are led by physicians and having physicians at the table, which has been key. And probably the most important element here was data. So I've shown you kind of some of our external data, but what we have inside the medical center is more kind of timely and actionable data. So a lot of those same metrics, we can look internally at how we did last month. And so that if we see a blip last month, we can address it now. And that's been really important. Once you get that, you've got to stay focused. And sometimes that can be hard because there's blinking lights everywhere that kind of gather your attention. And then equally important, nurturing your workforce. And I want to spend a little bit more time to talk about this because, you know, I think this is about recognizing that healthcare, that environment is a very risky and vulnerable place where our frontline workers are. They are working in an environment where mistakes can happen, errors can happen, and they can have devastating outcomes. And that's why a lot of times healthcare is actually compared to the airline industry. So as leaders, we really have to be purposeful in making sure that we're developing a culture of safety where we hold ourselves accountable in a non-punitive way. And that we not only work on keeping patients safe, but keeping our staff safe. And that's really important. And it's so important that we actually measure it regularly, every couple of years. We do a survey. It's called a Culture of Safety Survey. And I thought I would share kind of the results from our most recent one that we just completed in January. We had about a 50% response rate, about 3,500 folks completed the survey. And you can see the very top score, it's kind of small there, the 3.94 is kind of our overall score, which when you look at that center column, it's right on with the national academic healthcare average. And so we're really happy with that. And the last column is how we compared to the last time we took the survey, which was in 2022, and we improved. And you look at all those three domains under safety culture, we actually had improvement in all three of those. And this doesn't happen by accident. This is, you know, everybody in this room really supporting and purposely putting in programs and systems to make the environment safer. Another component of the survey I thought I would just touch on is resilience. And the reason I want to touch on this because I think it's in the public eye a lot regarding all of the issues around burnout in healthcare, which is very, very real. It's very real in all disciplines, not just physicians or nurses, but all the disciplines. And particularly since COVID, we have been putting a lot more emphasis and we have an Office of Wellbeing that's been trying to develop services and systems to support this. And we saw some great improvement this last time. And I think this is so important because a resilient workforce is going to be an engaged workforce. And the engagement drives safety, it drives quality. So you can see we had improvement from our previous time in 2022 in all areas. And what I want to highlight is the activation component. So our overall resilience score is 4.13, and then they divide it out into two components. And I'll start with the bottom one, activation, and you can see we're actually better than the national average in that. And I want to bring this out because this is actually the thing I love most about UMMC. Activation is all about why people are there. So the questions are about, I feel like I can make a difference. I feel like I can treat all patients equally. My work is meaningful. And we talk a lot about UMMC as a mission-driven organization, and it really is. And people are there for the right reasons, which, I mean, it just gives me goosebumps just talking about it now because I just think it's so great. Decompression, although we made improvement, I think this is still something that we need to work on. And this is about when folks leave the medical center, when their shift is over, how well they can kind of let go and disconnect. And that's a hard thing to do with all the social media and everyone's got email on their phone and things. But we're really still working on that. So, you know, I really wanted to highlight these because I think all the progress we've made in quality is really grounded in developing this type of culture. So with that, I'm going to kind of completely switch gears here a little bit. You know, and talk a little bit about the first strategy in the 2025 strategic plan. It's maximizing value and the quality of care. That is the strategy that is kind of, I guess, owned by the CMO's office. And so we put a lot of work into this. What I'll say is value is the next step of quality. You can see the value equation there. It's quality over cost. The equation is same regardless of industry. You know, we want to give the best outcomes at the lowest cost. For us, this past year, the goals within this strategy have been around developing an Office of Operational Excellence, which I'll talk about a little bit here, care coordination, documentation, and then actually acknowledging what our cost is. So I'll go into each of these just really briefly. The Office of Operational Excellence, to me, is really the cornerstone of this value strategy. So I just shared with you a lot of the, I guess, good work and success we've had in quality. And I think a lot of that was about developing an infrastructure to get that work done. That same infrastructure needs to be available for value. And so it's really moving that beyond quality into things like hospital operations and finance. And we've kind of started that work. I'll share with you a little bit about what we're doing with documentation, but it's also work around throughput and OR supply costs. Another component of this office is training programs for employees and leaders. So these are programs on how do you become lean? How do you run a performance improvement project? What's the best way to implement change? And we've had a lot of success with that, and folks are enjoying that. We have an executive director hired. He will start in July. A lot of experience in this work. A lot of the teams that do this work actually have an engineering background. They're not in healthcare. And that's certainly his background as well. So we're looking forward to that. Care coordination, I've talked about care coordination here quite a bit. You know, that for us is all about the right care at the right time in the right place. Things we've done to kind of push this is physician level data on our scorecard on the intranet, and that means their length of stay. So you can look up Lisa Didion on the internet and see what the length of stay is for my patients. And that really drives performance. We're all kind of type A's, want to be the best. And so it's a little kind of good competition. Improved care coordination staffing. So just like other disciplines, you know, case managers, social workers have been hard to recruit. So developing, you know, ladders, career ladders for them, looking at other ways of staffing. We have a new leader in place that's trying to develop a more supportive infrastructure to get that going. And what I really like about our new leaders is, you know, she's really focused on the data and making sure that we're making data-driven decisions. And then another big piece is partnering with post-acute care facilities. Just to share a little bit of data, I've shared this similar slide, I think one time last year. And what this data is this is for the fiscal year to date. So since July of 23, our two most common kind of dispositions for patients is either discharge home, which so far we've had over 14,000 discharges home, or discharge to a post-acute care facility. And that number in the middle, the 1.07 for home example there, is our observed to expected ratio for a length of stay. So obviously a perfect ratio is 1. Your patient stayed is just as long as they are expected. And that expected ratio is developed based on how well we document the illness of the acuity of our patient. You can see that's our highest volume. The work there is really about driving efficiency to get those patients home. The second biggest group are those patients that are going to post-acute care. So whether that's a nursing home or a rehab facility or a long-term acute care, you can see we are a significant outlier in that ODE. It's 1.76. It's a smaller volume of patients, but they drive a lot of our data because they're such an outlier. And this is the one where we're really trying to partner with post-acute care facilities to facilitate placement. So the strategy is different depending on where the patient is going. Documentation, there's been a lot of work. We've probably been working on documentation for about 3 years. And the strategy here is really getting the physicians to understand the value of their documentation and how it drives reimbursement and payment from payers, but also how it drives our quality, making it easier to document well, and then educating folks. So physicians in medical school don't learn anything about the business of hospitals and how hospitals get paid. You just don't learn it, and you kind of learn it on the fly. And so we're trying to be a little bit more purposeful about getting that education out in a more meaningful way. The big star here is, really documentation holds it all together. It impacts care, it impacts our quality, reputation scores, and it impacts reimbursement. So, getting this right kind of influences a lot of the end of the road outcomes. And then finally, cost. So our initial focus on cost is in the perioperative areas. You can imagine in the ORs, there's a lot of costs around supplies. There's also costs about how long you're in the OR and everything. And where we're really working on is supply cost and trying to develop a true receipt, just like if you went to the grocery store and got a receipt. I have 2 screenshots on here. We're working to become available to all physicians that do procedures. The one in kind of set in the back is literally says, this is the supply you used and this is how much it cost. And you'd be surprised how much surgeons don't know how much their supplies cost. And when they see that, they're like, oh, I could probably use something a little bit different. The second screenshot there is at the end of their case, the data they received. So they received how much that case cost from a supply perspective. So in this example, $1,542, what their average is, that particular surgeon, and then how they compare to their peers doing that same surgery. So similar to the length of stay, this kind of drives performance and helps us standardize the supplies and things that we use. So that's kind of it. I think, the summary for today is, quality is the foundation of value. We've got to get quality right to do value. Value fundamentals, care coordination, documentation, and cost. Those are our focus areas for that strategy. And then all the work we do needs to be supported by a culture of safety and the workforce. So I'm happy to take any questions. Appreciate the time.
I had a couple of questions. I'm looking at your chart that has various hospitals, which is helpful to me, particularly those that are in our market. Another chart that would be helpful would be against your academic medical centers or your safety nets. You showed that in another slide.
Yeah.
That would give us a different level of information. I wouldn't discard this one. I might add another one.
Sure. Okay.
Without making your presentation too much longer. But it helped me, for example, when you had the National Academic Healthcare information. Other question I had is when you do your teams, are those interdisciplinary teams or how do you structure them?
Yep, certainly. Okay. Most of them, of course, physician, nursing, and then it just depends what the team is working on. So we've had a lot of work, for example, on pressure injury. So the wound care nurses are a big component of that team. If we're working on infections, having infection prevention, and even sometimes the hospital techs involved because they implement some of the interventions we use to reduce infection. So absolutely.
The last question I had in looking at supply use and charges, are those charged to the patient or does that come off your total? In other words, does it affect your net or is that a surplus charge to the patient? So in other words, does the hospital gain or does the patient gain both on those?
Yeah, it's a great question. It can go both ways.
Okay.
So if it's an inpatient patient, that's an inpatient status, we get paid on a DRG. It's kind of a fixed payment.
So what's a DRG?
Diagnosis related group. So that is how CMS and the payers decide how much they're going to pay us. And what they say is that's a fixed rate, regardless of how long your patient is here, we're going to pay you that. So when the patient's an inpatient status, the cost and the charges don't make much of a difference. We know what we're going to get paid. However, where this will be impactful is patients that are having outpatient surgeries, because we can charge line item and increase our reimbursement for those. Mhm.
And you may not know the answer to this, but why did Baptist drop so quickly?
Yeah.
And you may not know, but it might be something that we could use to avoid or help us.
Yeah.
And if we need to discuss some things in our strategic session rather than this session, we can defer that if you need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I don't know for sure why.
Yeah, that we can discuss that in executive session,
Okay,
not here.
Mhm.
okay, that's all right, just.
All right, thank you, Dr. Didion. If there are no other questions, is there a motion to close the meeting to determine the need for an executive session?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. Anyone not needed for the executive session is free to leave the room or disconnect. If you're not an IHL trustee, you're welcome to wait in the lobby. Trustees, please give us a minute to clear the room and make sure the appropriate participants are virtually connected. Thank you.
Sounds like that.